In the topic of support, I want to ask today, how would your life be different if you felt fully supported? How would your life be different if you felt fully supported? Now, some of you may say to yourself, I feel fully supported, and good for you. But for those of us who can struggle with that sometimes, how would your life be different if you felt fully supported? Supported by God, supported by life, supported by the people you love, supported by strangers, and supported by yourself. I know for me, I feel a lot more mellow. I feel more loved. I feel more myself. I want to feel coddled because being independent and making my own choices is important to me, but I wouldn't shy away from ever asking for help. I really feel like I have everything that I need. I feel less fragmented. I'd worry less, be afraid less, be standoffish less. And most importantly, I trust. I trust more. I trust my own psyche. I trust my own body. I trust my own feelings. I trust other people around me. I trust this thing called life itself. I wouldn't be so caught up in my life trying to have big accomplishments, but more focused on how to better live in joy. How about for you? Well, what would it be like? How would your life be different if you felt fully supported the whole time? And is it possible? Especially with all those you-know-whats out there being you-know-whats. It's hard. It's hard. I love something that Ernest Holmes, the founder of our denomination, said. He said, if the gift of life is already made, and think about that, if the gift of life is already made, then our part must be to accept, receive, believe in, and use it. Your first step is to come to a more complete realization of who and what you are. Your next step is to enter into a more definite understanding of your relationship with the power. Your final step is to use this power for yourself and others. In other words, the gift of life is given. It's up to us to receive it. And this is an essential thing to understanding and living a life, which I think is possible, feeling fully supported, is we must step fully into the consciousness that sees the significance of I in everything. We must surrender this belief in they, in them, in something outside of us, because when it really comes to support, the gift is indeed everywhere, but the reception and the receptivity of that gift can often be in question. I know it has at times in my life, and I feel incredibly supported. I'm so grateful for the support in my life, but I can, being honest with you, also tell you that there's been two stories in my life. One of feeling and knowing that I'm supported, and where that has happened, I've succeeded. My relationships have been fulfilling and meaningful. But there's also another story, a story that I'm not supported, that I'm not getting my needs met, that someone out there is not providing for me in the way that I think they should have. And wherever this story is in my life, I'm pretty sad. I'm feeling empty. I'm lonely, and I'm not a lot of fun to be around where that story is. That's also where the story is about all the relationships I've built with people, probably unconsciously on the basis that they were incapable of supporting themselves, and I wanted them to support me. Because often, if we ask ourselves the question, if I'm not feeling fully supported by my life, by others in my life, is that about somebody else? Is that about they? Is it really about they? Or is it about me? Is it about what I choose to accept, or how I decide to change my life if I'm not getting support from where I am seeking it? I can see the damage that the story of not being supported has done in my life, and I think I used to do it to try and get greater support. I remember being in kindergarten. I can trace it back there, and there was these two really cute girls, good friends, Joanna and Sarah. That would be another running theme in my life, is liking the two best friends. It doesn't pay off very well. and Joanna and Sarah were playing, and I wanted to play too. I was all by myself, and so I decided what I would do is I would sit down and I'd start to sulk. I'd make sure I would do so in a way that they would see me. And they did, and they were so nice, Joanna and Sarah. They came running over, and Josh, what's wrong? Something's wrong with Josh. We have to be there to help them. And they were there, and they were asking what was wrong, and the smile on my face was a full one. I was very happy because there was nothing wrong. They were there now. But it was hard to explain myself, but it worked. And I wish that hadn't have worked, because I can see a pattern of my life of woe is me, of putting myself down, of presenting myself as not enough, as a way to get love, as a way to try and get more support. And you know what I wished I would have done? Just gone over and asked if I could play. Asked for what I wanted. So again, I can see those two stories. And I wouldn't say that the story of being supported became the dominant one until I stepped into ministerial school. That was a big moment for me, and there was something that I knew I was going to have to do when I did that, and that was say yes to receiving money from people.
Yeah.
I've always been really bad at that. Isn't that sound funny? The things we often want the most are the things that we reject. The spiritual gag reflex, as I like to call it. But I knew that if I wanted to be a minister, I also would have to be a fundraiser. Because don't ministers have to be fundraisers too? I'm sure that's what you love so much about them. But as a minister, you have to be a fundraiser. And we're in a great church because we own our building, and we're always open to more prosperity. But you have to be open to receiving money. So you can't say what I might say in my normal life, like, no, that's too much. Rick, that's too much. Don't throw that much at that kind of energy, or we don't need that much. No, it's okay. I knew that I had to have that consciousness of receiving in my life, and I knew I had to start with myself, and I was so grateful in ministerial school. I got some help from my folks who were here when I started. I was so grateful to them. And there was this woman, I just saw it was her birthday on Facebook. Her name's Vicki White. Some of you know her. And she put together this great team of people that fundraised for me, and there was this lunch. And I had to sit there and I had to take checks for people. Now that might sound like your coolest dream, but for me, I was turning upside down. I had to say thank you to these people, and I had to say yes. I had to be deserving. I had to be welcoming, and I'm glad that I did, because that laid the steps to even get to be where I am now, receive so much support from Reverend Peggy and so many other people to get to be a minister. But it was one of the hardest things. But it was an important yes, to think about those areas of your life where you might feel like you're not getting the support that you need. And to say, is my yes full in this experience? I got to take that yes and I got to apply it to all the other areas of my life. Am I saying yes to being fully loved and supported in my romantic relationship, in my work, in my own psyche? Am I saying yes to the support that may be available to me? Dr. Holmes also said, the one who would heal hate must first learn to love. The one who would live a beautiful life must commune with beauty. The one who would give happiness must first become happy. The one who would heal a sense of loss must first have arrived at an inner realization of wholeness. So when it comes down to this question of support in our lives, if the answer is no, that support isn't there, is that because of they, or is that because of I? And when I can learn to have, or at least minimize, a consciousness of they or them from my consciousness and embrace the I, then I can take responsibility for my life again. I think there's two real dominant myths in our culture that so many of us live in or inherit that keep us from feeling supported, that keep us from living in gratitude, living in joy. The first is the myth that life is a test, that you were created to be tested by a God who isn't here to help you but to watch you, to see what you do. That you were created not to be supported but to be judged as worthy or unworthy in the eyes of God. I don't know about you, but for me this is a destructive model. It worked when I was trying to learn right from wrong. when I was building a moral compass. But when it came to wanting to be supported in my life, to feel that I was living at one in a world that I could trust, believing in a God that could perform miracles and do amazing things in my life, I had to shift that perspective. In Science of Mind, we say change your thinking, change your life, but if we were getting down to the mystical truth of it, it would be change your God, change your life. It's only when we expand and embrace a model of the sacred that isn't way off distant judging us, but is ever present within us, active, that active verb, that active happening in our lives. Something, as the mystics say, that is nearer to us than our very breath. That's how close God is to you. That's how much the divine loves you. That's how significant you are. So that's a big shift, isn't it? The other myth is the Darwinian-centered myth of survival of the fittest. That life is about survival. It's about getting by. It's about getting to the first. Because if you're not first, you're last. And as we all know, that whole surviving thing works really well for all of us. and I don't even think, and the reason why I call it a myth is because I don't even think Darwin believed in this type of one-upmanship. Even Darwin really pondered this question of altruism, of the person who risked their own lives to pull someone off that might be heading off a cliff, or an army man who puts himself in danger or throws himself on a bomb in order to protect his comrades. Even Darwin understood that we seek the survival not only of ourselves, but the groups we care about, our family, our culture, and hopefully our own human race as well. So again, this initial system of me first, me survive, totally asserts the idea that there's me and there's a bunch of they out there, a bunch of not me. To move into a recognition that life isn't about survival of the fittest, but of survival of the strongest, of the most centered, that learns to identify itself not as separate from the world, but a part of it. That's how we really move on through a legacy or through a consciousness. The authors of our book of the month, The Path Appears, go even so far to say in their biological studies that perhaps the term survival of the kindest is even more wise and applicable than the idea of survival of the fittest. I know that I start getting into trouble in my own mind and in my own life when I start believing in they. Sometimes it's a convenience because I don't want to take responsibility for myself. But ultimately it separates me from who I really am. I know that I'm doing it in my own personal life when I start blaming other people for how I feel, for the way that I am. And it's only when I can start to remove the they that I can take responsibility for how I feel again. Even if someone's wronged me or done something ignorant, that will happen, but that doesn't mean that I have to rely on them to support and know the truth of who I am. I can remember who I am and move forward with that. Politically, I can do that in work if I'm talking about the them. They up at the top, those people, as opposed to seeing that I'm maybe a part of a company. And maybe what I say, maybe I contribute to the culture that's there. Politically, I do it when I say, those Democrats do this, or those Republicans, we are Americans, we are in a democracy, right? That they might do something wrong, but we are responsible for how we respond, whether that's with criticism or shining a light on an issue. We can see it when we see a bombing happen on the other side of the world, and we may try to comfort ourselves by saying, oh, that happened to them over there. That was an awful thing that happened to they, whether it be in Beirut or France or whatever it may be. It's important to remember that happened to us too, that we're all human beings. And that even that little boy or little girl that was born in a place where there's jihadism, where there's Islamic radicalism, was born just the same as I was. That he or she is me too, that they were born just like me. The only difference is I got the support that I was looking for. I got supported and brought up in principles that mattered, and they were unfortunately twisted into a belief system that rewards murdering other people, that rewards a sense of separation. So not that people don't need to be held accountable for their actions, but the more that I can move away from they and embrace that understanding of we and I, the really, at first it might be scary, but the more safer the world can begin to feel to me. Part of getting a leg up in this world for any of us is learning to receive this support. I loved reading the story in the book A Path Appears about Khadijah Williams, who was a young girl who grew up right here in Southern California. And she was going to school just little bits here because she was homeless with her mom and her sister, and so she only did 2 weeks in 3rd grade, maybe a week in 4th grade, but she tested high enough that she knew she was support. And she shares this. She said, "Once I understood that school could serve as a permanent solution to my life of poverty, I basically latched on to education like a life vest. I had the focus, I had the knowledge set. Education was going to literally set me free." The authors share that while living with her mom and sister in a homeless shelter in Orange County, she rose at 4 a.m. each day, commuted by bus to school in Los Angeles, and after class participated in academic competitions, track and field, and the debate team. Then she would take the bus back to the shelter, returning by 11 p.m. She scored the highest grade on SAT tests and earned just shy of a 4.0 grade point average. And she would go on through support, as she would share, to get to go to Harvard and graduate from Harvard, to live a very fantastic life. And now she's dedicated to helping others. And she says some important words here. She says, "You can't climb a ladder if it's broken. You need support." For me, that support was through mentors and strangers. Kaja goes on to say, there are so many students out there who need that support who aren't getting it. And there are so many people who are willing and able to give that help, but they don't feel like they're the right person or in the right place. The truth is that they are, and they can really make a difference. And just do that by putting aside those fears. So there's 2 essential points to being fully supported and living a life centered in I instead of somebody else. Living life centered in ourselves. And that has to do with this idea of giving and receiving. And we all know this, but we can understand more profoundly that when we give, when we support, we are receiving. We are supporting ourselves. We are giving ourselves the greatest gift we can when we give and support others. And in turn, when we receive, we are giving the gift to others, the gift of life, the gift of mutual receptivity, the gift of cohesion, the gift of saying yes to our good. Almost everyone who has a story of not being supported in their lives has at the center of it a belief that they are unworthy or undeserving of a greater good. They chose to make it, some might be, again, deserving of a judgmental label. But we have no right to hurt ourselves, to continue to hold back ourselves from receiving our good. As Gina shared so well in her invocation today, that there's something to be said about increasing our happiness, increasing our well-being, loving ourselves. And it doesn't just do good for ourselves, it does good for others. Another central quote that I discovered in this thing called You, like I was sharing with the new members, that was important for me, is these words from Ernest Holmes. He said, "You rob no person when you discover your own good. You limit no person when you express a greater degree of livingness. You harm no one by being happy. You steal from no one by being prosperous. You hinder no person's evolution when you consciously enter into the kingdom of your good and possess it today." So your thriving isn't just important to you, it really benefits all those around you. And if Sting, the wise Sting, is correct in his words, what was the quote again, Gina?
By pretending you're a different world from me, I shed my responsibilities.
Shedding responsibilities. Yeah, it's up to us to thrive and to recognize that by increasing our happiness, we can be an example for others to do the same. Our authors quote Henry Ford, who said, "The highest use of capital is not to make more money, but to make money do service for the betterment of life." Could we not also apply that to our own spiritual good? That the role and the reason to increase our happiness isn't just so that we have more of it, but that it can benefit those around us. That the best reason to increase an experience of love in our lives isn't so that we can hoard it, but that we can show and increase it in our relationships and with those around us. We don't need to suffer in our love or suffer in our good, but be proud in it and allow it to express itself more abundantly. So I really appreciate getting to share with you today. Thank you so much for being here.